My name is Martha Brock. I'm not going to tell you my age. I was born in 1942, and I was born in Lincoln at the Mott Clinic, and I have lived in Cane Hill most of my life. I started to the first grade at Cane Hill School, and I've just had a pretty good life in Cane Hill. I have really good memories. We had the most fun. I can remember going to school. Before I started school, my sisters would take me as a special treat as a guest. They were in high school and they would take me, and I'd get to have the day in school, and I thought it was just wonderful. When I started to the first grade, they had two long tables that was full of books, and my sisters had read to me real often, but they never read to me enough, and I could hardly wait to get to learn to read. And I can remember looking at those tables and thinking, someday I can read every word.
Okay, now this interview is by Scott Davis, and it's part of the Cane Hill Oral History Project, and we just want to be sure that you know that we have your permission to use the interview to reproduce it for educational purposes.
I would be honored.
Thank you. Tell me about your parents.
I had the neatest parents. Mama was born around here. I really don't know where she was born now that you're asking me, but around here very close. Her family was from here. Her dad was Robert Louis Collins. Actually, I just remembered she was born in Jim community over on the other side of Lincoln.
What was her name?
Cornea Elizabeth Collins. Cornea Elizabeth Collins was her maiden name, and her father was Robert Louis Collins. So shortly after she was born, maybe when she was about 4 or 5, they moved to Clyde, and she with the rest of the family lived there. Now my grandfather was Robert Louis Collins. As I said, he was struck by lightning and killed when my mother was about 12 years old, which tore up their whole family, and it was really a hard time for them. And my mother went to Texas and lived with her aunt. She went to Texas when she was about 16 and was adopted by them, and met my dad, Herbert Howard Patrick, and that was in Wichita Falls, Texas. And they married. They went to New Mexico, and Daddy worked on the big bridges and those high up places in the mountains. And they moved up there the first few years, couple of years of their marriage, and lived up there in the mountains. Mama said it was always they just had a picnic. They had a big time because it was young people, and they had the whole world before them, and they loved it. They had to put their food in sacks and hang it in the trees, or the bears would come and get it.
Tell me about your earliest memories in Cane Hill.
Right close to where we're sitting right now. This was, I believe this was the bank, and in back of it was my sister and her husband had a cafe, had a restaurant. And Vicki Banks, my best friend, lived right up the hill here. And I had come to visit Dorothy and Ernest for the day. Vicki came down, and the next thing you know, we were playing out there in that field. And I think we were about 3 years old.
Okay. Tell me about going to school in Cane Hill.
Going to school in Cane Hill. Oh, it was hard because our teachers expected you to listen. Our teachers expected you to learn. We had one very strict teacher, Mrs. Finley. A lot of people will remember her. You better learn if Miss Finley was your teacher. But overall, it was just common sense. You used good manners. You spoke politely to your teachers. You minded, but you were only kids. And we had a big cloakroom in the back of our classrooms. So if you had a secret that had to be told, you would signal to your friend, and both of you would sneak to the cloakroom, not believing that teachers even knew where you were. So we'd have our little talk, tell our secrets, fool around as long as we dared, and then come sneaking out. It was not your usual school classroom.
Tell me about some of your teachers.
Well, I just mentioned Mrs. Finley, and yes, she was strict, but the truth is, if it hadn't been for Mrs. Finley, even though I'd said how much I wanted to learn to read, somehow or other, well, I got something wrong with my eyes, and I had to miss a whole lot of the first grade, and I got behind. And I don't know, I got the idea that I was stupid and I couldn't learn. Well, Mrs. Finley wouldn't stand for that a second. She was going to teach me to read, and she taught us phonics. And by the time I think I was in the 6th grade, I could read on the 12th grade level. That was because she taught me. And she didn't teach me sweetly. If you would be taught, if you were in the classroom and there was 4 classes in the room, and she would be teaching one class, and you were talking and fooling around on the other side of the room, all of a sudden she would take an eraser and bing, right on top of the head. So, I mean, she was not Miss Sweetheart, but she was a teacher. There was other ones that we had a man teacher at one time, Mr. Small. I can't really remember, he didn't make much of an impression on me. Then there was Miss Pridemore. Miss Pridemore was a great teacher. She was friendly, she was fun, and she taught us.
Good. Tell me about the stores and the businesses here in the Cane Hill community that you may have come to.
Well, Shaker's. Shaker Yates, he had the post office, and his daughter was Sharon. Sharon and Vicki were my best friends. Vicki was her cousin. Sharon Yates was one of my best friends. Shaker owned the store and the post office. And I just thought it was a wonderful place. It was big. It had cement floor. It was cool. And I would get to come with Daddy to get the mail, do stuff. And you get an ice cream cone, you get a bottle of pop and RC Cola for just 5 cents. And they had their loafers bench that would be sitting there telling tales. And it was just a bunch of farmer guys, and you could sit and listen to them if you wanted to, but you better be quiet. And Shaker had a feed store in the back of the regular general store type store, and it had all kinds of feed with sacks. Everybody used those sacks to make their school clothes with. The women would go back and they'd go with their husband to pick out the feed, dairy feed, chicken feed, that sort of thing. And she'd pick out the material that she wanted to make her dresses with. So we all went to school with feed store sack clothes. And most of the women could sew well, and we all had about the same thing. We were all pretty happy. I never felt like I was being poor because I was wearing feed sack clothes. I was glad to get a new dress. Vicky's mother worked at the factory, and they would buy store-bought clothes a lot. And her grandmother was like a seamstress. Oh, Granny could make anything. And Vicky always had beautiful clothes. So did Sharon. They both had beautiful clothes. But like I said, I never felt like I was being downtrodden or without. I lived on a farm. My mom and dad worked hard. Mom was at home. She churned butter. She cooked, made fried chicken. We had sweet tea. You heard of Southern sweet tea? Man, we had the best Southern sweet tea. And I forgot what the question was, but...
Tell me about your routines at home. What would the kids do to help out? What would the family, who did what around the house?
Mom did it. We did what was asked of us to do. Mike and I were the youngest of 5 kids. The 3 oldest did a lot. They milked cows, they helped feed chickens, they did a lot of adult work because Daddy worked out, and it was a farm, and there was heavy work. But Mike and I, we really had it pretty easy. Mom would teach me to cook. I'd be sitting in the kitchen while she cooked. I would help wash the dishes. Mike, I can't remember what he did. He'll tell you he did everything, but I can't remember him doing anything. And so, I mean, my family, I think Mike and I were really fortunate in our youth because we lived on the farm, got to play outside, didn't do heavy work at all.
Let me ask you this. What did the kids do for fun?
Everything. We did everything. We played in the woods. We played in the creek. Outside the door here, there's a creek that runs through Cane Hill. We went swimming. We'd sneak over there, of course. I'd come down to the store with Daddy to get the mail. Vicki and Sharon would be here. Mike, Russell, Dwayne, Pyatt. We'd pretty soon all get together and we'd just be going to go over to the creek and wade a little bit. Well, guess what? One long till we was wet to our necks. And we played till Daddy got ready to go home. He never, well, come on, let's go. We didn't get in trouble. But one time I lost my balance. And luckily, my sister from Texas, my sister and her husband from Texas was here. I lost my balance. I went under. Couldn't swim with a hoot. I thought I was drowning. And George had to jump in these good clothes and drag me out. So we played like any kids, except we played with the things of nature and our own games and just enjoyed being together.
What did the adults do for fun back in those days?
I don't think they knew how. No, they did lots of things. PTA. PTA was a big social gathering. They would have the meetings, usually at night. Everybody would bring refreshments. They'd have their business, and then it would be a social time. And they'd have the adults would have a good time talking. The kids would be outside playing in the dark and running all across the Cane Hill campus. We didn't get hurt. We were running in the dark. There was trees and rocks, and we didn't get hurt. But they also played rook. Rook parties was a big deal. Mom and Dad loved to go to the rook parties, and there'd be a rook party at the school in the summertime, like, I don't know, every 2 or 3 weeks, and everybody would bring their refreshments and they'd play rook and the kids would play outside.
Do you have any memories of the mill or hearing people tell stories about using the mill?
My mama did. They would take their corn. Now, it might have been wheat too, but I always took it for granted that it was corn, and they would take it and have it ground there. They would go on a wagon, of course, back in that time, and they'd take their corn, have it ground, and have it sacked up and bring it home and use it for that year.
What can you tell me about the history of the college building and the school?
Oh, I can't offhand just remember, except it was burned by the Confederates and that it had to be replaced. But my history of it was when it was a grade school. My sisters went to high school, but by the time I got in school, they had disbanded the high school. They went to Lincoln. My brother Robert was probably one of the last ones, and he would have been about in the 10th grade, that went to the high school. And he went to Lincoln to school, and I don't know, changing from a small school to what we thought was a big school, the transition was not pleasant to him, and next thing he knew, he was old enough to join the Navy, and he joined the Navy. So I can't really tell you much about that long time history.
How long did you go to school at Cane? What was your last year at Cane Hill?
8th grade. We were the last 8th grade graduating class.
How much do you know about all the restoration work that's going on now here in the community?
Just from what I've seen on the Facebook and on the website, which the website is, it's amazing. It's really good.
Do you have anything that you would like to see done with the old college and the school building once it's finished?
I don't have any specific wish to see it in any way, except for it to continue to be a center of the community and where people could come and enjoy it and continue the fellowship and the good times that we've had.
You had some stories you wanted to share about one of your classmates, and we never did get to that yet. Can you tell me in your own words who she was and why she was an inspiration to you?
Vicki Banks. Vicki Banks, I told you a moment ago, she was my best friend from the time we were 3. And we went to school together. Sharon, her cousin, was right next to the best friend. But Vicki was always a lady. She was good. She was always polite and nice. I thought she was really pretty. And she had a coincidence. Something happened that it's just a coincidence, I guess. when we were about 10 at one of the PTA meetings, all the kids was running and playing, having a good time. Vicki was running just as hard as the rest of us, yelling just as much, and then suddenly she just kind of give out and sat down on the rock wall, and she said, I don't feel good. And I didn't have any patience with her. Get up, Vicki, let's play. And she wouldn't. And then by the end of the week, her throat had paralyzed and she had polio. Why did Vicki get polio? None of the rest of us did. We were all in the same place. We were all doing the same thing. She was in the iron lung for 3 months. But she got over it. She was a smart girl. She came back to school and she was in the same grade with us all the way through. Graduated, Cane Hill with us. But then, years later, and I can't remember the date, we were having a Cane Hill reunion, just a regular reunion, the annual reunion. And we were sitting outside on the campus, and we were having a good time. All of us ladies were enjoying visiting, talking. Vicki was just as much into it as the rest of us. And then suddenly, same thing. I don't feel good. And they say that when you've had polio, that virus will affect you again years later in another area. When she was a kid, it was in her throat, and at this time it settled in her legs, and she was in the hospital 3 weeks or more. She was in rehab a long time, and she recovered again, but it did make her weaker, but you wouldn't know it if you, and she won't talk about it. She don't feel sorry for herself a bit about it, but is that a coincidence? The very same place, the very same thing, the very same words, but anyway, she's okay now, and she's just she's still pretty, she's still a lady.
What other stories can you think of from back in the day in Cane Hill that maybe I haven't thought to ask about, or just things that come to mind?
Well, I know you're asking me about things that happened that I probably shouldn't talk about. Oh, yes. Oh, yes, there's a few. I've got quite a few, but I'm going to save those for another time. They're not something you might like to hear.
Anything else that we can hear you want to say before I finish it up?
Well, our 8th grade graduation was really special. Before the graduation, Lincoln invited the 8th graders to go to a banquet at school. Vicki and I were the only two that went from Cane Hill. We both had new dresses. We both thought we were beautiful, and we got acquainted with the Lincoln kids we'd be going to school with the next year. And we also went to the high school and watched the seniors practicing to graduate. Now here's a story I've told lots of times and love to tell it. We, the Cane Hill kids, the Ween School, the grade school kids, Morrow, I can't remember, Cane Hill, Evansville kids, were up in the bleachers watching the seniors practice. And the cutest, handsomest, black-headed boy was practicing to walk down the aisle. Black hair, curly hair, and he was, as usual, being pretty ornery. He was out of line. They were telling him, stand up, walk over here, and do that. It was Johnny. He didn't know it, but I had my eye on him even then.
Anything else?
Well, I do have the best story, but I just can't tell it. But anyway, Vicki and I were great buddies, but we were a little bit sissy. We wasn't either one very athletic, and we didn't know, we just wasn't very athletic. We couldn't play baseball very good. I thought I could play basketball, but I couldn't. But everybody was playing baseball. We were having the best time, except nobody would choose me and Vicki because we weren't very good. And so, okay, fine with us. We got up at the batters. We were playing workup, and none of the good none of the teammates would call us because we weren't very good. Well, Vicki and I got at the home base, and we ran the bases. We ran to home around the wrong way. Well, that certainly caused a lot of commotion when they seen us going the wrong way. And we come in and made our score. And so then they were all mad and yelling at us, and Vicki and I stood up there sweet as could be, got ready and went again. And they were all madder than ever. So the third time they decided they was going to stop us, and they were coming after us. Well, at second base we knew we better run for it. The baseball field was out at the far end of the campus, so we had to run for it. We ran to the school, clear across the campus, ran in the bathroom and locked the door with all the team after us. So, I don't know, it was pretty fun.